All right, I'm gonna start by asking a couple questions. How many people in here have a job? Okay, how many people who have that job and make that hard-earned money are willing to just give it away for free? I didn't think so. Okay. My name's David Aguilar, and today I'm gonna discuss the welfare system and why it needs reform. My main claim being that current welfare in the U.S. is hindering its recipients more than it's helping them. A little background information on the welfare system. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, a federally funded and governed welfare system was established due to the overwhelming number of families and individuals in need of aid who had little or no income. Welfare resided in the hands of the federal government for 60 plus years before Americans became extremely unhappy with the system. Issues of welfare abuse were a hot topic, as it is now. Americans complained that individuals were not applying for jobs, having more children just to receive more benefits, and staying married just to qualify for greater benefits as well. In 1996, President Bill Clinton and the Republican Congress passed the first reform laws that actually gave the control back to each state. Since reform in 1996, the type and amount of aid available to individuals and dependent children varies from state to state. When the government gave control back to the states, there was no longer one source of requirements, which in my opinion, and is still to this day a mistake. There should just be one kind of like, level of quantitative, Although requirements differ from state to state, the programs are relatively the same. Aid comes in forms of health care, food stamps, child care assistance, unemployment cash aid, and housing assistance. Now that you have a better understanding about what the welfare system is and how it got its start, I can begin to tell you about my presentation more thoroughly. I'm going to address three major issues, one being that although welfare was initially created to help the needy get out of poverty, currently it's actually keeping families in poverty. Two, being that the current welfare requirement verification is so overloaded that the workload is too much to handle, leading recipients to fall into legal and illegal loopholes in the system. And three, that the longer the current welfare system continues on the cycle it's on, the worse off the people on welfare are going to be in the long run. Now back to my first supporting claim that welfare is keeping people in poverty. According to Marcia Ibarra and the Journal of Sociology and Social Welfare, for people with limited and no work experience, the monthly cash welfare is between $638 to $673 a month for doing nothing. Now, there are millions of reasons to be on welfare, but I'm interested in the individuals that are taking advantage of the system, the individuals that don't have a skill set useful to society, the individuals that don't care to learn a new skill, and the individuals that choose to be too lazy to find a job and feel that fulfillment. I don't know about you, but that's definitely not the example I want my children to follow. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, research done on January 1st of this year puts the total number of Americans on welfare at 12.8 million. The total number of Americans on food stamps is at 46.7 million. The number of total Americans on unemployment insurance is at 5.6 million. I think that's staggering. According to the same study, the total amount of money you can make monthly and still receive welfare is $1,000. There are 39 states in the U.S. that pay more than $8 an hour, an $8 an hour per job. There are 6 states in which welfare pays more than a $12 per hour job. And furthermore, there are 8 states that welfare pays more than the average salary of a teacher. What is that? More than our teachers? That's a joke. Okay, my secondary claim, back to that, that the system is extremely overloaded. The welfare system is so swamped with applicants as well as recipients. In 2012, Obama cut $5 billion from the food stamp budget recently. I don't know about you, but I can guarantee that $750 million used in food stamp fraud had a big deal to do with that cut. Furthermore, it's apparent that the system cannot keep up with the number of rewarded applicants, considering the entire welfare program totaled $80 billion to run in 2012. And that was obviously not even enough, hence the $5 billion cut. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of Americans suffering significant hardships, such as having utilities cut off, getting evicted, or suffering food shortages, has escalated immensely during the recession. Between 2005 and 2011, nearly 7 million additional people were unable to make a mortgage or rent payment. suggesting that as the nation's last-ditch effort to help people in dire need, it's not working. And to my third supporting claim that the longer the cycle of our welfare continues, the worse off recipients are, consider this. According to Stephanie Minsimer, a staff reporter in Mother Jones's Washington Bureau, the TANF, which is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, block hasn't increased since 1996, meaning that the country spends to help what the country spends to help the poor families in the program has fallen 30%, and benefit levels have fallen even more in some states that cut benefits after the financial crisis started in 2007. That being said, the number of families with children living in extreme poverty, that is on $2 a day or less, has gone up nearly 130%, according to Minsimer. What does this mean, you ask? More people are becoming dependent on funding that is already overextended to the point Obama's making huge cuts. This in turn is creating a vicious cycle. Less funding is available and more people are moving toward the welfare program, which is exactly what we don't need. The system is doing the exact opposite that it was created to do. It's creating a dependency on something that is quickly running out and could potentially be non-existent in the near future. According to Robert Rector and Jennifer Marshall of the Heritage Foundation, the fact that the number of recipients has exploded recently and that the funding is seriously being cut is a double negative. All this proves is that the success of the program is in fact measurable, and that there has essentially been no improvement since the war on poverty began more than 4 decades ago, which is pretty alarming. So not only is this program making people more dependent on government funds, the fact that people are making more money on a welfare check than a minimum wage job does nothing but compound their decision to stay at home and not get a job. Why would you want to go out and get a job when you're making more money sitting at home doing nothing? In closing, we as a nation need to propel the needy into the workforce, not entice them to stay on government assistance. And the program in place today is stagnant with awarded recipients more than capable of becoming self-sufficient. Welfare reform is necessary, and that should be more than evident now that I've presented my presentation.
All right, the audience survey is okay. The point of view that you expressed seems straightforward. You've got a lot of background information to lead us into the topic and your point of view. I think you could probably cut down on some of that. The historical context isn't necessarily as useful as you need. The argument is that the reforms from '96 seem to have failed to either move people off of welfare or control the costs. So I think there's a way that this argument can be built, but it does seem to me that you're kind of arguing two contradictory positions, like the double negative that they're referring to in the Heritage Foundation quote that you have at the end, and that is that there's apparently a disincentive to work or to get, or there's a desire to rely or depend on this. Well, at the same time, those resources are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm not exactly sure how that's a disincentive to work if the resources that are going to be available to you are becoming smaller and more reduced. Now, at one point you said, you did have that one place where you're talking about what the costs are in different states and how it might be competitive with a particular kind of job, like a teacher, for instance. I would say in that situation, I could see why there would be a disincentive to work, but that doesn't sound like it's likely to be the common position, because you just described how they're cutting benefits for people. They're reducing the amount of money that's being spent on food stamps. So that's a little bit confusing. At one point you dropped in some information about $750 million on welfare fraud issues, and I wasn't sure how that was supposed to fit into the argument. So I think there's an argument here to be made that the current welfare system does in fact need reform. I think you've got that part right. The question is, does it need reform because it's inadequate to the needs of the poor, or because it is creating a disincentive for the poor to work? And I think that you need to pick a point of view. You're trying to ride both rails at the same time, and that's, like I said, seems to be a little contradictory. I thought you did a pretty good job citing your evidence, and the presentation's fine. All right, thank you.